In this edition of Impact, the ancient practice of food foraging finds a revival in modern times.
Foraging is basically getting in touch with nature and sourcing your own food. It's a lifestyle.
Then we visit a small community in Mexico where a devoted woman is working to make a difference.
I remember thinking, why are those people living on those hills in those conditions? Somebody should help them. But I never thought that person would be me.
But first, we follow the journey of a young sea lion who needs help recovering from an environmental problem.
The great thing about this animal is throughout this, she really had the personality of an animal that we knew was going to survive in the wild.
Welcome to Impact. I'm Grace Lim, this year's supervising producer. In our first segment, we visit the California coast, where an environmental problem has put sea lions in danger. We meet one sea lion, number 74, who just might have a fighting chance with the help of a rescue group.
California sea lions normally should be very alert, very robust, especially the pups and yearlings running around. The pups that we were seeing in the beginning of the year this year, they just, for lack of a better word, they just looked really sad.
What was really hard this year was to see how severely malnourished these pups were. These really were animals that were on the brink of death and starving to death.
It wasn't just limited to a couple of pups, it just every day brought in more and more pups.
What was amazing to see was how our team pulled together and rehabilitated these animals and really gave them that second chance at life. The first time we rescued number 74, she was the 74th sea lion we rescued since January 1st of 2013. When she initially stranded in March, she was actually one of the cases that came in during the unusual mortality event. She was 11.5 kilos.
Jen and I don't remember the last time the quarantine area was empty.
This is at least 15 to 20% under the body weight that she should be. She was pretty unresponsive, extremely lethargic, and her body was starting to shut down. She really was on the brink of death.
Number 74 is a California sea lion, a species that belongs to the group of animals known as pinnipeds. At the start of 2013, sea lion pups began stranding in mass quantities. By March, the National Marine Fisheries Service declared it an unusual mortality event, or UME.
This year's event really began in January when the rehabilitation facilities in Southern California specifically started seeing high rates of strandings of young of the year. So these are pups that in January were about 6 months old. These animals at that age should still be with their mothers, and they should be on the islands off the California coast. So to have them on the mainland and to have them stranding in January was kind of already a little unusual. And then it kept going.
Quick poke, there we go.
There's a time of year that we call our stranding season. It's when we know a lot of the animals are going to be weaned from their moms and they may become malnourished.
Baby nails.
On average, we rescue about 100 to 150 marine animals a year. We were preparing for that.
We used a small needle, we were kind.
It's okay. During the unusual mortality event, Santa Barbara, San Pedro, Laguna Beach, the facilities there starting getting hit with higher number of rescued animals than average, but at that time SeaWorld was not. So we offered our assistance to these facilities. After we did that, the UME had moved further south to the Mexican border, and that's when we started to get hit with a high number of animals, and we rescued over 400 young California sea lion pups.
Number 74 is one of the 400 patients at SeaWorld. However, her case was unlike any of the other sea lions. She fell victim to the UME not once, but twice.
We can do this either with vitamins or with antibiotics. If the animals have an infection and need treated, we just hide it in the gill of the fish, just like you would probably with your kids, and sugar, cough syrup. 24, get your head start, buddy.
She had been returned to the ocean in April, but her good health didn't last long. A month later, she was spotted, stranded on a nearby beach. This time, starvation wasn't her only problem. She now suffered from aggressive pneumonia.
So here's a radiograph of 74. She presented with difficulty breathing. And if you look at the screen, you can see that the darker area over here is air outside of the room. And that color is, that gray to black color is typical of what air shows up on an X-ray. And typically healthy lungs show up as fairly similar to the background air, because lungs should be air-filled when they're normal and not diseased. But you can tell that this girl's lungs are filled with a dark white area, and that gave us a clue that she had a lot of bacteria and pus in her lungs.
We actually weren't sure if we were going to be able to treat this pneumonia and get her back to being healthy enough to survive in the wild on her own. Fortunately, we were. This is one of the initial areas we would put one of the most emaciated, lethargic, malnourished animals. This is one of our shallower pools. Most of these animals, when they came in, were severely dehydrated and extremely weak, and they had a hard time even pulling themselves out of this pool. So we can actually even put a cover over this pool or pen and keep it completely dry in case the animal is so emaciated and its condition is so guarded that we don't even want it to have access to water. Then as they start to progress through the system, start to eat on their own, start to gain weight, we'd move them into areas 2 and 3. Normally, during a normal stranding season, we'd probably see 15 animals back in this area between all 3 of these quarantine areas. During the unusual mortality event, at one time we had 50 animals just back in these 3 queues.
The high volume of sea lions became a major strain on the centers in Southern California. National Marine Fisheries Service opened another site to take in elephant seals from surrounding shelters, and the location was a bit unusual.
Yeah, we're in the mountains, so we are already a very well-established facility for all other animals, just excluding marine mammals. So, you know, kind of the logical next step, why don't we just start doing marine mammal rehabilitation as well? All right, so we are under some construction right now, so how it is configured in here is not at all how it looks when we actually have animals. This is our quarantine area. That is basically just to keep them separate from the other animals that we already have that are in the rehabilitation process.
But rescue and rehabilitation wasn't the center's only responsibility. Much of their work dealt with the pups that had died.
We were doing a lot of the necropsy for them. We found a lot with abscesses. They were just large pockets of green and yellow pus all over their body, whether it's in their lungs, in their liver. It looked like they got sick systemically.
The investigation is still underway by National Marine Fisheries Service, but they're certain about one thing.
There was a lack of prey available to those pups. The reasons behind that lack of prey is what we're still working on, trying to figure out. It doesn't necessarily mean that there are fewer fish in the ocean. It just means that maybe they're not in the places that the sea lions can get to.
Despite the mass strandings this year, scientists aren't worried about the number of California sea lions. Today, there are approximately 300,000, and that number continues to grow. Investigators use these events to take a look at things that may often go unnoticed.
Unusual mortality events typically kind of highlight certain things that are actually occurring at a lower level all the time. One of the things that we did in this unusual mortality event was we put satellite tags on more pups than we typically do, and we can look at their tracks and, you know, see how well they're doing post-release.
Number 74 is one of SeaWorld's first and last patients from the UME, and today she will be released. For SeaWorld, her return to the wild marks the end of this event.
The great thing about this animal is throughout this, she really had the personality of an animal that we knew was going to survive in the wild. And that was really positive signs for us that we were going to be able to give this animal that second chance, or third, in her case.
Where we're going to return 74, we know we're setting her up for success. There's other sea lions around, and there's a lot of bait fish around. So she's got a great chance going out there.
The goal is to rescue these animals, rehabilitate them, and give them that second chance at life to return them to the wild. That's the happy ending, and we know now that animal can take care of itself, and it's going to do well, and it's going to survive out there, and there's another animal on that beach that's probably malnourished and needs our help.
In our next story, we meet a couple who has turned foraging into a culinary art and business. It's a big task, but they show how nutritious and delicious wild food can be.
But those are scarlet monkey flowers, which are also edible.
People eating wild foods goes back to well before there was Homo sapiens. I mean, that goes way back.
In this area. Well, no. Foraging is basically getting in touch with nature and sourcing your own food. It's a lifestyle. Okay, so here is some fresh mugwort, sort of. When I grew up in Belgium, my grandmother used to tell me to go get, for example, stinging nettle to make some soup. So I learned a little bit already about foraging. So I started munching on plants, and I guess I never stopped. Mugwort. That's what you use. It's a remedy for poison oak, although again, you're supposed to do it beforehand.
In terms of how people figured out what was edible, partly it's trial and error. Partly it's observing what animals are eating and trying that.
Every week I will learn a new plant, I will label it, come back the next day, take a look at it, take some of it home, cook it, play with it, see what I can do. Sometimes you even feel like the plant talks to you, and I'm not kidding. Like you pass by some plant, you get this like sudden urge to actually investigate that plant.
People need to be very careful about what they harvest in what locations because the native environment has really been severely disrupted in California. The native flora has been really persecuted by pavement, introduced animals, introduced weeds. People have to be really careful that they've identified the plant they're harvesting correctly because some plants are actually poisonous and easily confused with one another, or you might have an allergic reaction. You could just be sensitive to it, although it's not technically toxic.
A very interesting green, kind of a tan green, and then you have those beautiful little flowers right there. You find that all over California. Just don't smoke it. I guess somebody can have an allergy. It's a new food. I always tell people when they come to wild food to try a little bit, not
But I honestly, we've been doing this. I have not heard one.
No, hundreds of people, thousands of people on my side, and one person had a little bit of a reaction on a wild radish, and to be honest, that person didn't look healthy to start with. This is a perfect plant to eat raw too.
I think the best way to describe us is food geeks. I mean, we can talk about, I don't know, one dish or ingredient for days and hours, and we don't watch television, and we don't really go see movies. So this is our entertainment. All right.
And everybody has water. Ready?
Well, we get there, we unpack, and we greet everybody who comes, and then, you know, they don't see any of the setup. They just see a picnic table and some coolers, and I'm sure they're thinking, oh, great, you know, park picnic. And then they leave with Pascal, and I need him to be gone for an hour. So he takes them on a really informative foraging hike, and usually, you know, they get so caught up in it, and I'm always like, be on time. So I'm fighting the clock because I don't have stoves or ovens. I have propane burners, torches. I get creative with the steamer. So we want to cut this. This is a soft jerky that was basically cured in sugar. So I'll finish cooking and then garnish, and plate for 20 to 30 people. So they get back and it's set up and ready for them to taste. And then usually people will always say, how long is this thing going to take? But by the end, we're kicking them out of the park and it's getting dark, and they love the experience of sitting there, having a cocktail and some food, and it really does feel like a lounge experience, but in nature. Potatoes with a little bit of sage butter, and underneath that is a quick cabbage pickle, and the flowers you see on top are just some wild radish flowers. People eat with their eyes, and people meet around a table, and it's an easier foray to introduce people to foraging when it's a social gourmet experience that they walk away and really enjoy. Then they're going to remember the plant, they're going to remember that foraging is a resource, and it's going to be more friendly.
Is that the sage butter?
I make a little ball. I put the little ball in my forefinger. There we go. When you open your mind to opportunity and you're ready for it, we've been busy every minute of the day and night, and we've just been meeting with people who want to meet with us, networking with people, and you never know.
Yeah, we also talking to different restaurants and stuff too that may be interested, you know, because we've been doing that for so long that we have a lot of knowledge. You can see that like the love that goes into the food, you know, where we can provide that, and yes, it can be expensive, but if you take a look at the amount of work that goes behind it, I mean, some of those preserves that we have takes months to put together.
I know personally this has been a labor of love for us because we put our savings into making this work. It costs money to produce this stuff. And it's a business. I don't want to get mired down and burnt out. I have so many chef friends who've left the industry because in this economy it's so hard unless you're part of a large restaurant group. So I don't want that. What I would love to do is have a really small 8 to 12 seat shop where we sell preserves and it's a tasting. So it's kind of what we do now, but in a stationary place that people know that they can come, and it's seasonal.
There's a hillside community just across the border in Mexico that has a new school. We meet a humanitarian who made it happen.
Colonia La Esperanza, one of the ciudades perdidas, or lost cities on the outskirts of Tijuana, Mexico. A region of 180,000 people, but so obscure you can't find it on a map. However, one woman did.
I drive to Mexico every single day. I cross the border. Sometimes it's a 25-minute drive to get here and about a 50-minute drive to get back. It can be longer if there's a longer way to the border. Where should I park? Over here on the... Here we go. There we go. We're gonna go look at the construction now. before the men go to lunch. Okay, listo?
Christine Brady, a native of Pennsylvania, stumbled upon this region by chance 26 years ago as she was on her way to Ensenada to vacation with friends and family.
I studied physics and engineering, used to work for the Navy. I was married and had a baby when I first came to Mexico. And I remember driving down the coast to Ensenada and thinking, why are those people living on those hills in those conditions? Somebody should help them. But I never thought that person would be me. People were living in 8-foot shacks, basically wooden structures made out of plywood. And they were young people, typically parents in their early 20s with 2 children under the age of 5 years old who were trying to homestead a piece of property and had a third-grade education themselves. I talked to my friends, what can we do, what can we do? We decided to start a small nonprofit organization.
Brady started the Americas Foundation, an organization that builds and runs schools for the low-income families of the region. The project began only as a kindergarten, but eventually bloomed into a full elementary school.
Christine was looking for an architect to work with them on the school. And what really made the two of us want to work together is Christine wanted the school to be really beautiful because she thought that would help the kids and the different people from different parts of Mexico to kind of work together.
It's not the aesthetics alone that make Colegio La Esperanza such a valuable place for this community. The school gives these children the chance to bolster their education in an area where other opportunities are scarce. Many of the students, like Carlos Manuel, come from a single-parent household, where often the mother must work full-time in a local factory to provide for the family.
When you live in the U.S., you tend to forget, you're so comfortable, you tend to forget what's going on the other side of the border. You tend to forget that there's so much poverty and misery. And also when you're in the US and if you hit some economic downfalls, you're like, oh, I won't be able to do this trip or I won't be able to have this leisure. But those people across the border sometimes don't even have nothing to eat. Sometimes they cannot even afford an education. Sometimes they make them choose between working and going to school.
¿Es cierto que eres el más peleonero?
Sí. ¿Quién es el más peleonero aquí? A ver, digan la verdad. El Carlos. El Carlos. ¿Y tú qué? Tú me haces enojar.
¿Y qué piensa de la escuela? A mí me gusta. Me gusta porque primera está cerca de la casa. Me gustan las clases especiales que le dan música, ballet, ecología, inglés. Mis niños están becados. Yo tengo chance de trabajar y de que ellos estén ahí en la escuela. Salen hasta las 3. ¡Sin pelear! ¡Carlos! ¡Ey! ¡Carlos! Vete para adentro.
¡Me aventó una piedra!
Vete para adentro. No te aventó una piedra. Vete para adentro. Vete para adentro. Vete para adentro.
¿Sí viste lo que me avientó en la espalda?
Sí,
¡El
vi.
primero! ¿El primero me lo avientó?
Vete para adentro.
Como siempre. Como siempre. Tú eres así todos los días. ¡Cállate tú! Te callas porque a ti nadie te habló.
Carlos, ya, cálmate.
Y tú, Ernesto, ahorita vas a ver, ahorita vas a ver cómo te voy a agarrar.
Ok, bye bye.
No, pues ayer nos fuimos caminando. Desde aquí hasta el palacio.
Es como 13,000.
No, es que lo que pasa es que ya tengo como 2 meses que mi esposo no ha trabajado.
Es que lo que pasa es que pues nosotros pues ya no hayamos que hacer para que porque él ya no tiene trabajo. Y luego aparte de eso, yo ya no hallo qué hacer. A mí me han estado ayudando en una capilla. Allá por las 5 y 10, allá es donde me ayudan para mi mandadito porque ya no sé qué hacer. A veces ni para las tortillas tengo.
Bueno, te cuidan un poquito, pero eso no es, es como estás en emergencia.
Gracias. Gracias, cuando menos yo parar, cuando menos.
Sí, para el transporte a trabajo.
Sí, los temas caminantes yo todavía tengo que sacar también.
Lupita, buena suerte.
Gracias.
Bye.
The Americas Foundation does not focus only on the children. However, Brady finds a range of ways to help the parents as well.
We try to motivate the parents personally by taking an interest, by helping them with something that gives them a little more hope because they might be in a depression, by sending them to one of the social service organizations that do exist. Principally, we start by counseling them. Periodically, we have a group of parents that would be engaged in what's known as group therapy. Al lado, And sometimes we just have to call the police. Poquito más. Poquito más. Ajá. Y este brazo poquito. Y aquí, así. Ajá, así. A mí me gusta más. ¿Sí? Ok. Está bien. Esto lo van a hacer cada clase cuando empiezan, ¿entienden? ¿Sí? Muy bien. I love these guys.
The schools are private, but all the students receive at least a 60% need-based scholarship from donors primarily in the United States. But in recent years, the number of U.S. volunteers has decreased, along with the funds.
Unfortunately, the news media only shows the bad things about Tijuana and Mexico. And there's so many wonderful things, so many beautiful things, and so many flavors. And the people are very enthusiastic, and they work a lot, and they work very hard. For the American dream also,
When you have a situation without job opportunities and where there's no social support, the person has to be extra prepared to survive and provide for their family. And this means they have to be educated. Education is the only solution that will help them prepare to be a better citizen, to provide for their needs of their children. And this is why we're dedicated to providing education to the children in this community, especially since they're so intelligent and so talented. Most people that live in the United States don't even realize that Tijuana is literally smack up against San Diego. Tijuana and San Diego are the same city, divided by the international border.
We are just one region. We live close to each other, we're neighbors, and we need each other.
Tijuana and Baja is a gift to San Diego and our region. And we're really one region, not just one part. So we need Tijuana.
That's all for this edition of Impact. Be sure to check out all of our episodes at uscimpact.org. Now let's take a look at some of our upcoming stories.
From the beginning of recorded time, fermentation technology has been in place. The early wines, early beers, early breads, all types of fermentation that we've used in the food supply.
If you're growing right outside your back door or your front door, you just go out and you pick your dinner.